are up for it, is, I'm going to hit that one. There you go, is language or learning. And so one of the things that I specialize in, as Jeanpierre mentioned, is I work especially with what we call in America dual needs learners, or often called dual cap learners. And these are students who have some sort of a learning disability, but they're also trying to acquire language. Okay, and for us as teachers in the classroom, these can be some very tricky situations with what do we do, what approaches do we use, and how do we help these students succeed. One thing I would like to add is, although I work right now in a middle school setting, the strategies and approaches that I'm going to present to you work at whatever age group you are working with. You just need to modify them for that age group. Okay. All right. One of the, oh, come on now, work with me. There we go. So the first thing I would like you to do is take a look at my case study number 1. And I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to think for a second, maybe less than that. But I'd like some thoughts from you as teachers. If this is one of your students, no matter the age, could be university, it could be somewhere in the K through 12. What comes across your mind for this? So first, let's read it to yourselves and think about it, and then I'll ask for your thoughts. Okay, does anyone have any thoughts about Mr. Thomas here? What's going on with him? How would you react as a teacher? What's going through your head with him?
I'll start.
Sure.
When I think about his situation, I think there's a lack of support at home, a lack of support to get him out the door and to school on time, and
Right.
a lack of support to help him do his assignments at home.
Good. Any other thoughts? There's no right answer and there's no wrong answer. I just like to hear thoughts.
Well, I would say first that he shouldn't be pressed to complete the writing assignment, because the loud disruptive behavior is the worst possible thing that can happen. So I'd kind of go easy on the guy, and I'd try to find out, what is the cause of the problem? Could be a problem from home, could be that he's not confident in his writing, or he feels like he can't do it. So he needs some support from the teacher on his writing. So possibly you could offer him the chance to do the writing assignment before class begins, or at least talk to him about that possibility.
Okay. Any other thoughts before I go on?
Yeah, I was just thinking, following up on what Cheryl said, and actually Fred said the same thing, that there seems to be a lack of support in the classroom as well. If Thomas was one of my students, I think I'd want to have some other support there with me as well, or some kind of, at least whether not in the classroom, but in the background, talking to other people on staff, for example. What do we do with Thomas? So it seems like the situation is, what does this teacher do with Thomas? But it should be rather, what does the system do with Thomas, maybe?
Okay. So as I said, there's no right answer and there's no wrong answer. And actually, we're going to circle back at the end of this and take a look at Thomas again. And if we have time, I'll let you know what we did. But Thomas quickly became a favorite child of mine for a while. We spent a good 2 years together. sometimes with the principal, sometimes just the two of us, but he's a good kid. All right, but this is the type of situation when you have students who also have learning disabilities. These are the types of situations that are often going to come across in your classrooms. And it is important to learn, like, how do we deal with this and what exactly is going on? So, there we go. So the first thing to look at, and again, remember, I'm looking at this from an American perspective, so please do keep that in mind, although I have spoken before with some other organizations in Japan, so I do try to bring in some of the Japanese rules and laws as well, but I'm sure you guys are probably much more aware of it than I am, okay? So just keep in mind slightly different lenses. But when we are talking about dual needs students, we're talking about students primarily who have what's called a specific learning disability, okay? And the key to this is that specific learning disability, you're talking about the psychological processes when students use language or when they're understanding language, that something in their brain is just not clicking 100% and they get tripped up. The other part of it too, is that it's important to remember that these students do not have a cognitive disability. If you were to give them an IQ test, their IQs are the same as yours and mine. They could be higher. Like, we're not talking about students with low IQs. We're talking about students with regular, like average to above average IQs that are not succeeding in a classroom. Now, that's different, although there are those psychological processes, from when you're an English language learner or you're a Japanese language learner, whatever it is. When you're a language learner, you're looking at how do you take in the speaking, the reading, the writing, and the listening aspects of a new language. So these are slightly different processes, but there's a lot that's common between the two of them, which makes it difficult when you have a student who's a dual needs student. Okay, let's look at this. Again, this is just from the United States. These are different disabilities that you can find with students that would be in a public school or a private school within the United States. As you can see, the primary disability type is that specific learning disability. And I love that word specific because, as I show you in the next slide, it's not really specific at all. It's kind of can be a little tricky. But there are other students who are also language learners who go beyond the specific learning disability. I do work with autistic students, students who are hearing impaired. Down here, the intellectual disabilities, I do often spend a lot of time working with students who want to learn English but are intellectually disabled. When somebody is at this level, which we also call ID or cognitively disabled, this is where you start to get into students whose IQ would be less than average. But other than that, a lot of the vast majority of students that most of us will see are that specific learning disability. I'm going to admit this person. Sorry, there we go. All right, so let's look at this. So here's this, again, it's called the specific learning disability. In Japan, it's just called the learning disability. And you can see from the umbrella, holy cow, it's a whole number of things. There's actually, on the left side of the umbrella, 7 primary processes that we can identify. So if a student has what's considered to be a learning disability, it could fall under any one of these 7 processes. Okay, it could be any one or a combination of. It could be they have trouble with language, it's phonological, it's visual spatial processing, like they just don't see that. It could be perceptual motor. It could be the speed at which, like, they might process things slower. It could be their memory and their attention, or it could be executive functions. But it could be, it could be any one of those. Part of the problem is that How do you know which of the 7 are at play? You really don't unless the student's family decides to undergo further testing through medical field. Within the United States, we can simply identify a student as having a specific learning disability, and teachers may get a student and I will not know which of the 7 processes are at play. It's kind of up to me as the teacher to kind of talk with other teachers and figure out what is going on. It is a problem, but it does happen. And as you can see, if you look over on the right side of the umbrella, any one of those 7 areas can affect the student specifically. You would see it in the classroom coming out in any one of those 6 ways. You might see it in their oral language, in their reading, the written language. You could see it in math, their organization and ability to keep on top of things, or even in their social skills. So think for a minute of what you're looking at on the left side and what you could potentially see as a teacher on the right side. And then you might be able to understand why this is so frustrating for many of us as language teachers, because it looks kind of the same, right? If they're trying to learn a language and you're responsible for teaching them a language, it kind of looks similar. Okay, so how big of a deal is this? In the United States, the most recent data of dual needs students has not been collected in 9 years. But in 2012, 9% of our students who were identified as having a learning disability were also considered LEP, which is lacking English proficiency, like they're trying to become English proficient. So they are English learners, 9%. This is 9 years ago. My guess is it's probably already at 10.5 to 11% of your students within the United States, and other countries have also recognized that this is a growing situation. How does this affect the classroom? Well, in the United States, it affects the classroom because we have legal documents called IEPs. Essentially, that is a legal educational plan, and we must acknowledge that they are a language learner as well as having a learning disability, and whatever plan we come up with in terms of how we are going to work with the student and educate the student, multiple parties must be involved in order to do this. And legally, we have to write out, this is our strategies, this is what we're going to do to help the student learn. In Japan, when you are working with students, especially when you're doing language learning or you're trying to teach them the content through the language, you need to be able to know why a student is struggling and be able to apply the appropriate strategies. Otherwise, it gets extremely frustrating for both you and the student because they're not learning. Okay. Also, I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but in 2007, Japan signed this and created the National Institute of Special Needs Education. I spoke a couple years ago, actually, I spoke with some teachers in Japan, and I think things are changing, and there are more schools now that are taking students who have special needs. But this is one of the goals that Japan has. They wish, in 2007, they stated they wanted to have 97% of special needs students they want to be taught in public school. There are still individual schools that exist. Japan has decided to go with a 3-pronged system that is very similar to what we do in the United States. You have total inclusion programs where you have students who are in classes with students who do not have special needs and just part of the group. You have pull-out situations where you have students, again, taking classes with everyone else, but a specialist or a counselor may pull that student out a couple times per week to work with them individually on the areas in which they struggle. Or you would also find that they may attend a public school, but they would take separate classes from other students, but at least they would still be going to the same school. So this is currently what's happening, which is important for you to know, because the students who are in your classroom, there's a high probability, depending on your class size, that at least one or two are these students who have special needs. Okay, so let's take a look at this. I love this one. So what behaviors could be misunderstood when you're in the classroom? And I apologize, I had this cute little graphic going where it popped up and you had to think about whether it was a language issue or a disability issue. And for whatever reason, my computer has its own mind tonight. So you just get the whole thing and you get to think about the whole thing, okay? But these are 4 behaviors that most teachers complain about, see, report, and think back to Thomas just 20 minutes ago, because he's in here too, okay? So these are 4 big behaviors that we would see in the classroom. And notice that they could have a disability explanation for it. Like it could easily be, okay, this is definitely a disability showing, but it's also a language thing. And for us as language teachers, it's going to be a little easier for us to look at that middle column, that ELL explanation, and go, oh yeah, my kids do that sometimes. So let me give you a few seconds to take a look at that. So when we're looking at this, okay, so think back to Thomas. And we took a look, okay, so Thomas avoids writing. That's definitely what he does. So what is going on with him? Does Thomas have a disability? Is this his disability that's flaring up and he is just not wanting to write because of his grammatical or lexical limitations? Or is he avoiding the writing because he's learning English and he's afraid of making a mistake, so he's just not going to go there? So what is going on? And this becomes a question that a lot of us have to deal with. I have a student who's in my class. I understand that they have a disability, but I need to know what's happening. What is at play here? Is it the disability, or is it the language? And the answer is, of course, the fabulous explanation of both. It's both, oftentimes, and they often play off one another. But here's a key thing for you, okay? If it's a learning disability, remember that the student has the same cognitive ability, their IQ is average or better, but if it's truly a learning disability, an intervention is not going to work, which means they're going to be stuck. So imagine a student is trying to learn a set of vocabulary, and no matter what you do, no matter how you present it to them, they're unable to remember those, say, 10 words in vocabulary, just to keep it simple. So you're just, like, here's your list of 10 words. Let's look at these. Let's learn these. And you're like, hey, I'm going to focus on these words with this student for a set period of time. Usually we do this from like 3 to 6 weeks, test them on this vocabulary, and the student is not getting the vocabulary. They're not picking it up. They're not learning. That would be an intervention, and we would say, you know what, this intervention is not working. The student is not processing what he needs to do to learn in a timely manner. This is a learning disability. Now, if you see the same student, but this student Also struggling in vocabulary. So you go the same 3 to 6 weeks, you work with them and you say, okay, let's work on this vocabulary. We're going to learn this vocabulary. And after those 3 to 6 weeks, you test that student again and you see that they have improved. Even if it's just a little bit of improvement. If a student is improving through learning, that is a language issue now. So the big key is that through the learning, they're not going anywhere. They are stuck. Then you can say, yeah, now I've got a learning disability on my hand, and this is a learning problem that's going on. So what are you going to do? Because really we need to look at some practical things. What are you going to do as a teacher in your classroom? And what I always like to say is, how in the world do I teach? Now I got this craziness going on. How do I teach? So these are my 6 strategies that I like to use visuals for that I know sometimes confuses people, but I will go through them. So the first way to improve your classroom when you're teaching, if you have dual needs students in your class, the first one here, see Mr. Frog here, you need to slow down and give that student some time. Remember that it's said before, if they have a specific learning disability, they often need more time to process things than does a student without a disability. I know that trips up a lot of people who go, but I've got this much to teach them. But sometimes you're going to just have to slow down. Okay? Let them think on it and process it in their own time. Let's take a look at this little girl with the ladder. Second thing you can do is you can work on differentiating in your classroom. And for us, our big part of differentiation is whether you modify a curriculum or you make the accommodations. This one I'm going to kind of look at. Do you guys all know the difference between an accommodation and a modification? And I need like a thumbs up, thumbs down, maybe. Okay, I got a no. Okay, so let's go through this. Okay, this is actually why I love this picture of this girl on the ladder. So this girl is picking apples, okay? In a modification, I see the girl is standing down there next to her father or her grandfather, and she's kind of reaching up and she cannot reach the apple. Okay, she cannot reach it. If it's a modification, I am going to take the tree branch and I am going to lower the branch so that she can reach the apple. I am bringing the apple to her. If it's an accommodation, I am going to bring her a step ladder, or I'm going to point to it depending on how stubborn I am, but I'm going to give her a step ladder and I'm going to say, climb the steps, reach the apple. I have not lowered anything for her, but I have given her a tool to raise to everybody else's height. This is the difference between a modification and an accommodation. Imagine the apple is your learning. It's your teaching. It's what they need to know. It's the knowledge. In a modification, I'm going to lower the learning for them. In English, plain English, it's a horrible saying, but it's true. We dumb down. Okay, we're making it easier. I'm not asking you to do the same amount of learning as everyone else. I've made it easier. I have simplified it. In an accommodation, I have changed up my teaching. I have given you strategies to help you reach the same as everyone else. Okay, so I built you up. It's a modification versus an accommodation. When you work with students who have specific learning disabilities, it can be very tempting to get to the end product by modifying and lowering your learning for them, but it's incredibly important to work with them and help them go step by step and raise them on their own step ladder. Doesn't do them any good for you to give them the answer. They've got to find it on their own, but you can certainly give them a toolbox. These are all different types of toolboxes, or sorry, tools in your toolbox. So besides time, another thing you can give them, and put it up here, was, you see the student schedule here, but the point is that you're putting them on a specific routine. You're giving them a routine so every time they come into your classroom, they understand what they have to do. For those of you who understand working memory, you guys all understand that if a student is sitting there trying to figure out what in the world the teacher is doing, all that working memory that should be going into your lesson and learning what you want them to learn is now being spent on, what is she going to do next? You know, what's coming at me next? Is there a quiz today? What, you know, was there homework? What is this group work thing that we're doing? We've never done this before. What is this new game? I don't understand this new stuff. That all confuses students. And when you have a learning disability, it's tenfold, and it just really trips a lot of students up. When you develop a routine, even if it seems boring, it just helps students so much because they know this is what to expect when I walk into your classroom. And that working memory is now freed up so that it can focus on what you need them to learn, and they're not kind of spacing out going, oh my God, what are we doing next? Are we opening the book? What page are we on? Like, they know this is what we do each day. Right. The next thing that I would recommend down here in the bottom left corner is visuals. And I know this looks way different from what I remember of being in Japan and teaching in Japan. This looks way different for a classroom than what I ever taught in. My classrooms in Japan were never this colorful. And actually that's a little too cheerful for me. But the point is, graphic organizers, pictures, whatever you can do to help them visually imagine what you need them to learn and to organize their learning is the way to go. It really does help them. For a student who has a learning disability, for them to just sit and listen to a professor lecture is incredibly hard on their memory, and they will space out faster than the average student. You really do have to provide them with things such as graphic organizers, take pauses in there, let them play with the content, okay? All right, the next thing is this little puzzle house, chunking. You've got to chunk things for students. They're not going to process as quickly as everybody else. They're going to break, they need things broken up for them. They need that information in smaller chunks and build it up to what you want them to learn. But give it to them in nice chunks. Let them play with it, let them work with it, let them process it, give them some time, and they're gonna get it. The last thing that's probably the most important piece for being a better teacher and teaching better when you have students with special needs in your class, this last one is you have to know your student. You have to know them. I'll be honest, this is not something that I used to do per se when I first started off teaching. I liked to believe that my job was to be the teacher. Your job is to learn. You can ask me an intelligent question, otherwise leave me alone. You know, like, we're not friends, there's nothing there. And slowly, thank goodness, I began to change, and I began to see that the more I learned about my student, the more they opened up to me what was happening in their head, what they understood, what they did not understand, what where they got lost. And I also began to learn little tidbits of information about them. So when they had difficulties processing what I was asking them to do, I could relate it back to who they were as an individual. I cannot tell you how many different papers I have read by high school boys on cars, because that's how they understand how to process things, because they love to read about cars and they write me papers. I'm like, hey, if it gets it done, it gets it done. But knowing your student truly is incredibly important. Okay, so I have a couple more. Here's 5 more classroom strategies that don't look as pretty, sorry. You can also strategically group students. Students learn well from each other, and by students chatting with each other, they often get that extra opportunity to process the information you're asking them to learn. Grouping them into small groups, I recommend 2-3 kids, let them work together, let them talk over what you're asking them to learn. That often gives them an extra chance to process the information. Again, because of the different language processing issues with students with special needs, it really becomes important to write as well as speak your directions. It doesn't hurt to have someone just, double check or film yourself every once in a while, just making sure you are actually writing things down for them, specifically what you need them to do, and you're speaking it. In as much as possible, create opportunities where you can work with your students one-on-one. I know it's so difficult when you have the larger classes, like you start to get 40, 50 students, 300 students, that gets really, really hard to do. But just, try to make a point of just, even if it's just a quick, hey, how you doing? Pick up 1 or 2 pieces of personal information, give each student that one-on-one time. Because again, that relationship building with students, especially those with special needs, you're going to learn more about them, and you're going to learn what makes them tick and how to help them when they get stuck. Also, we highly recommend that mistakes are welcome. Your classroom should be the safest place for them to make a mistake. Unless, of course, you're testing. I get that, not when you're testing. But other than that, students should feel free to come in and process the information you're giving them. And if they make a mistake, they screw it up, they didn't get it right, they should know that they can be at ease with that. When they start to build tension that they have to be perfect and everything has to be 100% perfect, that often inhibits their learning. The other big thing is not what I've been doing tonight, which is to let the students do the talking and you as the teacher do the listening. The more you can get students who are dual needs or students who have learning disabilities to talk about what they think they're learning from you, and you just listen to it, the more you're going to be able to catch on to what's happening in their brains and what works and what doesn't work. Let me see, I was going to tell you guys this. Oh, before I go back to Tom's, I'm going to stay back here. So I'm going to tell you one of the other really important classroom strategies is the necessity of teachers talking to each other. One of my most favorite stories is I had a student named Delilah that a very good friend of mine who was a special needs teacher taught Delilah for history, and I taught her for language. And we'd been working with her for about 2 years, and Delilah was pretty much about ready to drop out of high school. She was about done. And she was from the Marshall Islands. Well, one day she's sitting in there with this other teacher who happens to also be another Moore. So she was in there with the other Mrs. Moore. And Delilah gets like this totally confused look on her face. And I think the teacher at first thought, well, okay, she's spacing out, I've lost her attention. And then finally, Delilah finally raises her hand and says, "Miss, I don't know what this word is." And so my friend is trying to figure out how to explain this word a different way in English, like I honestly, I don't remember what the word was. It had something to do with history. So it's something like revolutionary or something like that. And she's trying to figure out how she's going to say this again. And finally, Delilah goes, no, I mean, I don't know what this word means in English. This isn't in my vocabulary in Marshallese. And it was so enlightening for the two of us to talk about this later, because we had gotten her to the point where she could recognize herself. Is this my learning disability that's getting in the way? Or is this my language? And for her, she could easily say, this is my language. I don't have this word in my vocabulary in English. I don't know what this word means. But if the two of us had not been talking together, if the two teachers had not been communicating together, we never would have picked up on this. I never would have heard that story. She would have never thought to come to me as a language teacher and say, hey, what's going on with Delilah? But that's why it's so important for you as teachers to collaborate and work with other teachers. So as you get to know your students and you find students that have special needs, it is truly helpful to go to the other teachers on their schedule and say, hey, what is up with this student? What have you noticed? Because together as a team, you guys are going to be able to figure out what helps and what does not help. But when you keep it just to yourself and you're like, oh, I can fix this on my own, it's not going to happen. We all need help when we're working with special needs students. It's one of the first things I do at the beginning of the year. In fact, right now for us in Virginia, it's summer, but our school year starts again in a couple of weeks. And I've already started to reach out to all the potential teachers of my dual needs students to start to put together a list of what are we going to be looking for to help these kids succeed. So again, it's very, very important. All right, that is enough of me for right now. Let me go back to Thomas. Given everything I've shared with you so far, and I do remember, like at the beginning, we looked at, was there a lack of support at home? How are we going to deal with this disruptive behavior? What's going on? Do we need to work with other teachers? So let me ask this again. What are we going to do with Thomas? Anyone have any different thoughts or additional thoughts? Are you writing it in chat and I'm not seeing the chat? Is this what's happening? Okay, so I'm reading, this was from before, but I'm just now reading Adam's thoughts, okay. Have we hit a whole new level of shy? Do you want me to tell you what I did?
I think that what Cheryl had mentioned and what Fred briefly mentioned, what I briefly mentioned as well, you covered, right? This idea of, when we said support, Cheryl was talking about home support, Fred and I were talking about school support. So this idea of communicating with your colleagues about the shared students, right? So that you're building into it support, into the system.
One of the additional things, so like I said, I worked with Thomas for a couple of years and he was brilliant kid, very funny kid. One of the things that we ended up doing that really worked well for Thomas was I started to record him. I started to voice record him. So again, his issue was his learning disability affected his ability to write. He could think quick and he could give you an answer quickly, but when he wrote, it was awful. And there were times, you know, like he had symptoms of being dyslexic. It was awful. And so what we did with Thomas was I would ask him the question and then I would record his voice. He would listen to it and then his homework would be to write down what his answer had been. So he had to listen to his own voice and then write it down. and then we would go through it. And that's how we started to get Thomas to write and get through it. But yeah, we did that. And once we got onto that, we started talking with other teachers to learn their strategies. And I think this was something across the school we did with him until he was comfortable writing on his own. Yeah. How about Jeanpierre, is it possible? Oops, that's not going to work, is it? Okay, let me give you guys another one real quick. Do we have time for one more? I think we do. Okay, so how about this student? This one really, I worked with this student for 4 years. So Clarabelle, when she came in, I was warned. I met Clarabelle when she was a freshman in high school, and I was warned by the middle school that this was a very flaky, flighty, totally not with it student, like, you know, say like an airhead. Like they're like, yeah, you're not going to get much out of her. Clarabelle graduated after 4 years with honors. She was on the honor roll. So what was going on here?
Jose, do you want to?
Oh, did we get someone in chat?
Yeah, Jose.
I'm sorry, I forgot my microphone. I'm just poking in the dark. I don't know. So she probably has some kind of disability, and I'm thinking maybe listening or some kind of focus disability that requires some kind of, as you said, Dr. Moore, some kind of accommodation with more text-based material, or maybe a recording that she can watch over and over again that's cut up into 5-minute chunks. I have no idea. I'm just poking in the dark here.
You're poking very well in the dark though, Jose. That's actually really well done. Exactly.
Oh my God.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not meant to be rocket scientists. And you guys, there's research out there that actually shows language teachers are really, really good at figuring out the strategies for these dual needs students, because most of us have been doing a lot of them. Anyway, so you're spot on, Jose. She has that need for, you know, she needs things repeated. She also needs things written down for her. Do you see how like she's distracted in class? She's looking out the window. She's staring, right? She's not following you when you're speaking. It's got to be written down to keep her focused. You're spot on.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I mean, not right that I'm right. I mean, right. I mean, I agree with you.
Anyone else have any other thoughts about Clarabelle?
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if I have to, I think maybe that the fact that she came from Japan to America, she had a difficult time adjusting to the change in culture, and maybe that hasn't really been addressed. And you know, because of family or social issues, everything was so rushed for her that she needed some way to sort of connect to a different environment that she never really got from any of her teachers in the middle school. That's just my idea.
And that's a really good one, Miguel. I 100% agree with this thinking as well. One of the reasons why Clarabelle stayed with me for 4 years, I typically only teach students like 1 or 2 years, and then we move them on to a new teacher. She stayed with me simply because I had lived in Japan for so long that I noticed things that she would or would not do that to me struck me as very Japanese. Just my experience teaching in Japan, teachers and students, the relationship is very different from in America. In America, if a student does not understand what's going on, they quickly raise their hand, they ask for help, like they're very aggressive about getting that help. When I was teaching in Japan, and this may have changed by now, students did not act like that. Most students kind of took it upon themselves to feel like they were responsible for their own learning. So if they didn't understand what a teacher was saying, I did not always have students come to me to ask for clarification. They would kind of ask someone else, they tune out and try to get it later. And I would see these traits with Clarabelle. And when I saw her start to do this, I knew she wasn't paying attention because she didn't understand, but she did not feel comfortable asking for help. So I would often just kind of quietly go up to her and say, hey, need a little help here? This is what we're doing. We're right here, and try to help get her back on track. So yeah, you're absolutely, you guys are great. You guys come up with great ideas. Great ideas. You're seeing things. Any other thoughts?
I was thinking about older bilingual children tend to translate for their younger siblings. So she's got a fluent older sibling who may be doing all the heavy lifting in English for her. And so despite having learner disabilities, in terms of language learning, maybe her sister's doing all the heavy lifting. And so Clarabelle's using Japanese or maybe another language at home as opposed to English.
Yeah, she was clearly using both her parents. Neither parent actually was very fluent in English. So her sister was definitely translating for the entire family, and probably was the person they would take like to the embassy to go get immigration paperwork and stuff. So definitely, you know, Clarabelle was not being asked to do any translating. So there was not the onus on her, as you said, for her to pick up English as quickly as everyone else.
Mallory, do you want to make your...
Okay, yes. Yeah, I was wondering, like, do you have any tips or advice? How do you make that, for example, that student, Clarabelle, like more comfortable to ask for help? Like...
I do a couple of different things. When I was in Japan and I had students who I knew needed help but wouldn't come, I put it on myself to go quietly to the students, like if they're doing like individual work or small group work. And I would just, you know, hey, I'm American, and in my culture, I'm used to students asking me, and I know that's weird, but could y'all just make me feel better? Does anyone have a question? Like, can I answer something? Like, I kind of play it stupid. But it's actually something that I've kept to, and even back in America, because now I work with students who, you know, their first day they get tested to see what their level of English is. The second day in America, hey, guess what? I'm your teacher. So I work with them also and just do the, I kind of need you to tell me where we are. And it's this whole relationship with the students, and it takes a while. It's not immediate, but usually after a couple of weeks, they have it figured out that I'm not going to hurt them. You know, I'm actually here to help them. I really do want their question.
Okay, thank you.
Some of the other things that you could do though is I've also done, depending on their writing proficiency, you could also do what we call exit passes. So you could have them write down one thing I learned today, one thing I'm unsure of, one thing I need help with, and they can put their name on it, and it's just very quietly given to you at the end of class. And then maybe either the next class you can address it for everyone, or you can quietly go up to the student one-on-one and say, you know, hey, I saw this question, how can I help you? I really try to make it at first as subtle as possible so that students are not embarrassed that they've come to ask for help. Because I have noticed many kids are embarrassed, like they feel like it's a bad thing to ask for help.
Okay.
So I think we've moved on into Q&A.
Okay.
So
Do you
Or Janet, do you have more
share?
slides? You have other case studies you want to show?
Oh, dude, I could talk forever. So you gotta stop me and then let me answer questions because I'll just go forever and you don't want that. So what other questions can I answer for you guys?
Can I ask a question? I'm Geraldine.
Hi.
Please go ahead.
I have this experience before when I'm so proactive in helping the students whenever they had individual work, but there are some students like, hey, I'm okay, leave me alone. So how would you deal with that?
That's where you have like you might have to get, like, in a nice way, a little bit of a confrontation with them. If they say they're okay, it helps to have the proof that they are not okay. So for example, if I've given them an assessment or a quiz, and I can see this student who told me they were okay just completely did not do well, 40% on the quiz. Okay, this is not good. I like to, come see me one-on-one or quietly come see me and say, look, you said you were okay. Data shows differently. And then, just kind of confront them. And again, I have found it has a lot to do with how you approach the student and just letting them know, I'm here to help you. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm not here to make fun of you. I'm not angry. I just really want you to do well. You thought you were okay. I thought you were okay. Clearly, no, maybe we need to work on this together and just kind of slowly go into it. I also give students a lot of time during my class to do the work so that I can monitor. So I might give them, say, the last 20 minutes of class to start working on an assignment. And then in my head, I know who's not going to ask me for help. And I'm kind of circling close to them to see how they are doing and if they're getting stuck, and going to other students and stopping. So then it's very non-confrontational, just a very quick, oh, that's a good one. Oh, maybe I would change that answer a little bit. Oh, so close. Often though, you got to catch the students kind of in the act of getting a wrong answer. And so that's why a lot of my assignments are done in class, so I can catch that. But yeah, it is hard, Geraldine. Like if they don't want help, it takes a bit.
Yeah. So there's like a culture here, like, oh, she's getting help. Like she's getting bullied because she's getting help.
Would it be as bad if you were doing it during class and you were doing it in kind of a situation where you were helping them, but you were also helping others? Like it's kind of like, what I'm saying? Like it's kind of nonchalant, like, oh yes, I'm going to help you for a little bit. I'm going to help you for a little bit. Would that maybe make it a little bit less obvious of what you were doing?
I was just going around because everyone is doing their work. I was just
Right.
getting around, and then I help everyone. Yeah, I help
Yeah.
everyone, but I don't know. Maybe they're just waiting for that a moment where, oh, she's getting help again. Maybe.
Yeah, it's sometimes it can be tough. Off the top of my head, the only other piece of advice that I can recommend is it also helps if students see us make mistakes. I will often make a mistake on purpose so that the students can have a good laugh at me and, hey, yeah, everybody makes mistakes. And then sometimes that tones it down a little bit, like not so much finger pointing at other people because now we're all laughing at me. So sometimes that works too.
We got a few comments here. One from Shiho, and then Jose has a hand up, and then Miguel also. So Shiho, do you want to say, turn on your mic and?
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
I'm working in the kindergarten and elementary school, and it's very different between the college and the junior high or something. And
Oh, yes.
it takes too long time to talk with shy kids in
Yes.
elementary school and kindergarten. And I was working in kindergarten with 2 years old kids, and they have ADHD things. And it takes about 2 years to talk.
I believe it.
Yeah. So
I believe it. And does that get frustrating for you?
no, I love that.
You're
job.
good. One of the things that I had a teacher tell me is that we never know how much good we're planting and how many good seeds we're planting for these students. So it takes you 2 years to get these shy kids who have ADHD to start working with you and really trusting you. But those are so important, those years. It's so important.
One day he grabbed my hands and it's so well,
and wasn't it a great feeling? Oh yeah, no, yep. Yeah, it takes time, and I tell you something, bless you for working with kindergartners, because my son just graduated from kindergarten and holy cow, he is crazy. So you are amazing for doing kindergarten work. I'm just saying.
Thank you.
So it's 11 o'clock. We were here till 11, but I think Jana, Dr. Moore is going to stay for a bit longer as well. That's
sure.
Okay, Jana. Okay, so Jose, you had, and then Miguel.
Yeah, that was a great talk, Dr. Moore. I really appreciate it. I noticed my good buddy, Adam Jenkins, is in the crowd, and I am learning from him a lot about digital technologies. What do you see as a role to be played by digital technologies going into the future during the recovery from the pandemic or beyond the pandemic towards helping these students or augmenting the strategies that you outlined today?
I think that digital technology is really going to be a great help. The pandemic, I'm maybe one of the few teachers who think that the pandemic was awesome in terms of technology, because I got to play with, I had robots, people. I had robots in my classroom to help me. But the great thing about the digital technology is that when you have students who, for example, struggle with writing, by giving them like a tablet or an iPad, they can start to voice record everything and then learn how to put that into writing. There are programs now that are geared at learning that help students hone in on what they're missing. And because students often have gaps in their learning when you have a learning disability. And a lot of those programs come in now to help those students find those gaps and work individually with the students when the gaps. So for me, and I know for my school, we're going to be very heavy. We are a one-to-one device school, which means every single student who comes into our school is given a laptop. We train them on how to use the laptop. If they have special needs, we adapt that laptop to their special needs. Like if you need enhanced, like if you have a visual impairment, we make it like the screen larger automatically. We do whatever we need to do to help them. So I think digital technology is just phenomenal for what it's going to do for these students.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
Miguel, do you want to tell us what you do?
Yeah, so this was just a passing comment as a reply to Geraldine, but the thing about helping students, I have noticed it as well before. Well, if you're helping someone one-on-one, you can just see everyone else in the classroom going, oh my gosh, she's asking for help. So I really lean into group work that way, because that way you're not helping a person specifically, you're helping a group. And
Yeah.
this also means that, you know, if they didn't get something the first time, one of the students can explain it to them in Japanese, and it gives more confidence to the people who are helping the other students too. So there's a lot going on when you do things like that. That was all.
No, perfect. Perfect. I agree 100%.
Other comments or questions?
I guess I have one
Sure.
question. How do you feel the students that you've worked closely with, how have they developed beyond, I guess, their disabilities or the difficulties they've had with learning into adulthood? Have you been able to follow up with them as they are adults to see how they're coping with, life now?
Mm. Yes, some of them. That's the advantage of being as old as I am, is I have a lot of students now that are now married. They have their own kids. I'm like, ooh. Yeah, I've seen a lot of them. And the truth is, for students who are dual needs students, these students who have these learning disabilities, it is a lot tougher for them. We have, it really kind of depends on the severity of the learning disability. It depends upon the strategies that we've used. We have some students who have been absolutely phenomenally successful. They've gone on to university, they have jobs, they are aware that they have this learning disability, but because we worked with them in that setting, in the educational setting ahead of time, they were able to identify it, kind of own it, so to speak, in American English, and then they've succeeded with it. Like, I've got a couple students who, they brag, hey, miss, I'm going to university, I'm in my third year of university and I haven't failed out yet. I have other students who have gone on, they have jobs, they have regular lives. The education system has taken the time to teach them how to cope with whatever disability they have and how to turn it kind of so to their advantage. It is not all roses. I have students that this has not worked out for them. I have students that have basically aged out of high school, but they are not really ready to go on to like a university or like a community college type situation. And so they are stuck. Like it doesn't always 100% work out. But I have more successes than failures.
That's great. It's really great to hear.
I think Nathan had a comment.
I'm reading, yeah. Yes, this is going to be probably one of the biggest questions for the situation right now with the pandemic. Maybe not as common or as accepted as it is in America, but most of the schools here are offering free counseling to students when they come back, or even if they're choosing. In America, you still have kind of a choice whether you want to come back in person or you're going to remain virtual. But most schools are offering free mental health counseling for students. I think it's incredibly important. We as teachers are often their first contact. I was in the classroom. So in America, we shut down on Friday, March 13th. The first opportunity ever for students to come back within Virginia was on September 8th. I was first teacher in the classroom, brought in my group of students who were absolutely petrified And, you know, we spent a long time together trying to figure out, is this the day I'm going to go home and have COVID? You know, is this going to be there? So I understand that a lot of these kids have this. They're absolutely fearful of what's going on. They've seen death. They've seen sickness beyond what anyone should have to. And it's a constant worry for them. You as their teacher, I as their teacher, we are often the people that they're going to talk to. And it's really important for us to listen, to acknowledge that they are scared. I think it's okay for us to say that we are scared too. We're all in this together. This is really kind of an unknown. But also to understand we're not their counselors. And when they say things that raise issues and raise concerns, I think it is okay, you know, to try to recommend that they go talk to other people and go talk to professionals. I saw Jose raised his hand. I don't know.
So Dr. Moore, okay, first, very quick question. I'm one of the administrators for online teaching Japan. I don't know if you know it. Oh, okay, cool. I would like to bring a lot of what you have to say to the online teaching Japan community. And I was wondering if it'd be okay if I could approach you about doing an interview on OTJ TV, if that would be all right.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. And second,
yes.
No, you go.
No, you're up.
Okay, and just to follow up to the question before, I'm sorry I missed the first 10 minutes of your presentation, but I think you have a background, a little bit of teaching in Japan, yes?
Yes.
And
yes.
When you notice some kind of, I don't want to say deficiency, but a place where the program of a school can be improved by being more inclusive and bringing in some of these suggestions that you have, what would you say is the best way to approach, say, the vice principal or the principal, or maybe say the faculty dean, about bringing in some more active ways to accommodate these students, especially if they're being maybe a little bit more conservative than they ought to be in terms of helping these students specifically in the ways that you would suggest? How would you say, what would you suggest as a way to get more allies from the administrators of your particular school?
So my school in America, or if I was looking at this in Japan?
In Japan, because if this was Canada or America, I mean, I'm pretty sure I would know how socially to approach a particular teacher. But let's say in Japan, from your experience in Japan, what could you recommend?
That was not an easy question.
I'm sorry.
No, that's all right.
Did you ever have that experience where you
yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I did have a student where when I was teaching at a high school, we had a student who was clearly had a learning disability and was struggling, absolutely struggling. And honestly, it was a lot of unofficial talks done with administration. Like, again, I haven't lived in Japan for a while, so things might have changed. But when I lived there, it was every Wednesday, we had this faculty meeting. And then after the faculty meeting, a bunch of teachers would go out and have dinner. And I'd always get invited because I was the crazy foreign person. So I'd go have dinner with these people and I'd kind of insert it just a little bit like, hey, you have this kid, right? Is he doing, this or that in yours? And, I just kind of feel like I'm doing something wrong with him, or maybe he needs something that I can't do. I put a lot of it, and I don't know if this was correct etiquette or not, but I put a lot of it on me. Like, I'm feeling like I'm not getting across as a good teacher. What else can I be doing? And what I saw was that it kind of got other teachers speaking to each other, that this is not always a common topic. It's not a topic that people really are open about talking about. I mean, nobody wants to admit as a parent that, hey, my child might have a learning disability. That's a tough pill to swallow. It's really tough to learn about. And to admit that this is happening. So, I mean, it's a very difficult topic, and it's a difficult situation. So it was often just very gently and just, hey, could we maybe look at doing this? And, and it was just very soft suggestions. Not much, you know, I was only at that high school for 4 years. That child was a student there, I think, just for, well, it's 3 years of high school in Japan. So I don't know that we actually did a ton of good, but for me, it was just very subtle, it was very quietly done.
Thanks very much again.
Yeah.
Susan, do you want to go ahead? And then I had something to say as well, but Susan, go ahead.
Okay.
Susan, did we lose Susan? She had her hand raised. I think she's fallen out.
I don't see her in the participant list anymore.
Oh, okay. So this is just a comment, wasn't a question. And you had said that mistakes are always welcome in your class, and that's something I always say to my students too. Mistakes are welcome, mistakes are fine, and I try to model that as well. But then we have tests, and where they're not welcome, and students are stressed about making mistakes in the class, and then we have a test. And I've never actually thought about this, but I say one thing, mistakes are welcome, but then we have tests where they're not welcome. And I've never, now my head is kind of exploding about how can I, you know, get students to, and I'm not talking about students either with special needs or learning.
No, just students, even just students in general.
Right? Like, how do I bridge that? But I'm going to stop talking because Susan's here, and Susan had a comment or a question. Susan?
Sorry, I got disconnected. I guess my question is, I do deal with supports, like students with disability here in Japan. I teach junior high school. There was one student in particular who was, I wouldn't say really violent, but he gets frustrated a lot during class and when he makes mistakes, and he would bang his hands on the desk and like show frustration or wouldn't talk after he makes mistakes. What would your advice be for those types of students who get violent or get easily frustrated when, even when we're doing like games or activities, if he makes mistakes, he just bangs his desk?
I have seen these students as well. In the heat of the moment when they're doing it, there's really nothing you can do except make sure that that child is safe when they lash out in anger, and make sure everybody else in the classroom is safe when he lashes out in anger. So that's the number one thing, is the safety. The second thing that I would recommend, and this is where it's crucial to work on getting to know the student, is the best time to work with these students and approach them often is when they're calm and when you're one-on-one with the student. So I've asked students, you know, hey, can you come see me before school? Just, you know, 10 minutes before class, pop in, talk to me. And again, I've kind of turned it around and put it on me, like, I understand that you get angry and you get frustrated. You can't always control it. It made me feel uncomfortable. Is there something we can do, like some kind of signal you can give me that this is going to happen to you? And what I would do is I would let one of the students that this worked with, he and I came to an agreement where when he was starting to get frustrated, like you'd see him, like he would actually bang his heads down and then grab the desk and like shove it. Right. And so that was always my concern, was one day he was going to hit someone or hurt himself. And he and I eventually came to a code where if he felt this frustration rising in him, he had a code word, or it was a signal that he had a signal that he would give me. If I didn't see the signal, he would say a word that was a signal between us. And I'd see ya. And I would just let him walk out the classroom and walk up and down the hall until he could calm down. And then he'd come back and rejoin the class. And that was just an agreement that he and I had. But we worked a very long time with him to get him to that point. Again, obviously safety is the number one thing. But then after that, if you can talk with them when they're calm and just, hey, I'm not here to judge you. I'm just here to help you. I just want to make sure that when you are calmed down again, you can come back to learning. So how can I help you? How can I help you stay safe?
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. Oh, and I'm going to go back to Jeanpierre's question about mistakes.
Sorry about that.
No, you do it. But I have a question for you. In real life, if you make a mistake, do you often get a chance to fix it? We do, right? So here's just kind of a challenging question. So when our students are in our classroom and we give them a test and they don't do well, should they not also have a chance to fix that? So even if you make a mistake on a test. So that that goes down a whole nother rabbit hole, Jeanpierre, but that was kind of one of the things that we've been working on in my school is giving students the ability to redo, so that if they make a mistake and they have an off test or an off day, they have an opportunity to show that they can learn from their mistakes.
We are coming up to 11:20, but Dr. Moore was here until 11 o'clock. So do we have other questions or comments, or can we let Dr. Moore go to bed? Other questions or comments? That sounded like I was telling you to go away, but I'm not saying that. If you have
No, those are.
Okay, so then I guess there's no more questions or comments. So would you mind please turn on your microphones and let's giving a round of applause to Dr. Jana Moore. Jana, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jana, you probably didn't see there were lots of thank yous in the comments for your talk. They appreciate it. And I'm gonna connect you with Jose later.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
if Jose can stay another minute or so after everyone leaves, that might even work better, okay?
That
Okay,
works.
everyone, thank you very much for coming today. We'll see you in a couple of months for our next talk, which is in a couple of months.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming.
Bye, guys.
Great talk, Dr.